So I'm joined today by Steve Karlen from the National Campaign of 40 Days for Life. He's actually the author of the 12th chapter in the 40 Days for Life book. So Steve, I'm so glad that you came down to join us today.
Hey, I'm blessed to pray with you here in Tacoma.
So right now, while we're standing here, there are people in front of Planned Parenthoods and other abortion clinics all across the United States. And the same thing as our folks are doing right back here, praying for the unborn.
Absolutely. We've got most of them are in the United States, but we also have some outside the United States. We've got a number of campaigns in Australia, a number of them in England. We've got them in Africa. It has truly become an international prayer campaign, and we're blessed to be able to, from site to site to site, all offer our prayers in unity and in solidarity with people who are praying to end abortion wherever they may be around the clock.
Outstanding. And so what have you seen in some of the other campaigns, Steve, that would be something that we haven't seen here in Tacoma on our little street?
Sure. Well, we've been blessed by great fruits coming out of the campaign all over the world. On day one, we got the first report of a saved baby. The baby was saved before 8 a.m. So this woman arrived on day one before 8 a.m. and she didn't want the abortion. We even know that women who are getting abortions, for all the rhetoric and the debate about pro-life, pro-choice, most women who are getting abortions don't really fall into that pro-choice camp. They feel they have no choice. They feel they have no alternatives, and it's the despair and desperation that takes them to the abortion center. And this woman was praying for a sign that she shouldn't go through with the abortion, and she came and she saw the people out on the sidewalk just like these folks are out here today, and she recognized that as the sign that she should choose life. I was in New York last week, in a town called Glens Falls, New York, and they had a really tremendous story there. We don't know any other details, but in Glens Falls, New York, the woman showed up for her abortion, and at the very last minute she must have changed her mind because she came running out of the abortion facility, out of Planned Parenthood. She was wearing still her hospital gown. She didn't have any shoes on, and she just bolted out the door, got in her car, and drove away. So we may never know exactly what happened, but by all indications, it was a life saved at the very last moment.
Praise God.
I was in Marysville yesterday afternoon, and they had the opportunity to talk with a young woman.
David Graves.
Yeah.
Hi, David. Did you get this?
They shared with me a story of a young woman named Monica, and they had talked with her, and she chose life, which is a great blessing in and of itself, but now she's been coming and participating in the vigil herself. So that is tremendous. Another exciting story that we had was maybe not quite as exciting, but it's still powerful in a big way. Folks were doing outreach on the sidewalks, just as you have been, handing literature out to people, and they talked with the young woman, and as they started to converse with her, they recognized that she just seemed kind of troubled, and sure enough, she had had an abortion. They encouraged her to go and utilize one of the many support groups, one of the many healing resources that is available to women and men as well who have had abortions. And she came back sometime later and said that yes, she had made use of those resources and was seeking healing. So that's a tremendous blessing. Back in my hometown of Madison, Wisconsin, we had a young woman who was abortion-minded, and she came and she spoke with the vigil participants, and you've probably seen those precious feet pins that show the size of the feet of a preborn baby at 10 weeks. That was what changed her mind. The volunteer was wearing one, and realized that she was the same point in her pregnancy that those feet would represent. She chose life. The volunteer gave her that pin, and she was just so grateful. So those are some of the very visible fruits that we have seen manifest themselves during this campaign, but I always like to encourage people to not get too caught up in those stories, because we know that so many of the fruits, perhaps even the majority of the successes, are invisible ones. I just saw a message from Abby Johnson today, the former director of the College Station Planned Parenthood, where the first ever 40 Days for Life campaign took place, former Planned Parenthood Employee of the Year, and she said in some locations, Planned Parenthood needs to overbook their appointments because there's a 75% no-show rate when people are out praying in front of that building. 75%.
Say that again? How much percent?
A 75% no-show rate at times when people are praying in front of an abortion center.
And so we wouldn't even know that. We wouldn't even realize that people weren't coming in for their appointments.
Absolutely.
It would be something we wouldn't recognize, and you see that, a consistent statistic of that
I don't know exactly the locations that this one applied to, but I think we can feel confident because we've heard similar reports from different locations. And we might not ever know on this side of heaven, but we have great confidence that when we're here, we might be standing here, we might be wondering if it's making a difference, we might even be tempted, and I think it is a temptation from the enemy to despair, to think that it's useless. Meanwhile, there are babies probably being saved while we wonder if we're doing any good. So that's one of the reasons I think it's so important to come out here and pray. It doesn't even necessarily have to be when the clinic is open. We've had stories where people have very powerful interactions, even when the clinic is closed, just passers-by coming down the street. We hear those statistics that somewhere in the neighborhood of 1 in 3 or 1 in 4 women have an abortion by the time they end their reproductive years. And so we really have a whole culture of men, of women, of families that are post-abortive or they're abortion vulnerable. And so our witness here always makes a difference, whether we recognize the fruits of it immediately or not.
So Steve, what would you say to someone who's never been down here to pray before, that maybe would like to help out, that feels a pulling in their heart, something needs to be done about this, and that they would like to participate in that, but they just haven't made that step to come down here and pray with us? Anything that you might offer them as an encouragement to make them feel a little more confident about stepping out in public with us here?
You know, there's a great story about Mother Teresa from Calcutta. She, of course, was the famous Catholic nun who did great work tending to the sick and the dying in India. And, you know, she was Catholic, but I think she speaks to Christians of all different denominations. And she was being interviewed by an American journalist at one point as she was tending to a very sick man. He was disgusting, he smelled terrible, he was covered in ulcers. And this journalist said in a moment of complete candidness, "I wouldn't do that for $1 million. And she said, yes, for $1 million, I wouldn't do it either. And she did it for the love of Jesus. And I think we can think about that in terms of many of us, myself included at times, are prone to say, I wouldn't go stand in front of an abortion facility for $1 million. But then I ask myself, but would I do it for Jesus? And I hope that's a question that we can all answer in the affirmative. And you know, it can be intimidating that first time, but I can say I've been all over the country. I've been all over my states before that. I've invited many people to participate in 40 Days for Life, and I almost never meet someone who goes out once and says, you know, it's not for me, I'm not going to do it again. There's something very powerful here, even though there's great sadness here. We're here bringing the light of Christ as a sign of His mercy, His love, and His healing. And that's a very important witness that we can play. It's nowhere near as intimidating as I think we think it will be the first time we do it. And I would also encourage those people, bring a friend or perhaps find a participant who is active already in this campaign and go with them for the first hour, and it won't be nearly as scary then. Just try it out 1 hour, and I suppose if you really are uncomfortable that hour, you don't have to come back, but give it a shot one time. And I'm confident that many people will continue to pray because they see the great suffering that exists here, but they also know of the great mercy of God. I guess one of the things that I would just add, perhaps, that we haven't talked about is, I know 40 Days for Life started in Texas, and every now and then I'll talk to people who will think, well, 40 Days for Life, that sort of thing works in Texas, or it works in the South, or it works in the Bible Belt, or the traditional Midwest. Can it work in a place like the Northwest? Can it work last week I was in New England? And I'm very confident that it can, because first and foremost, we've got a very powerful God. I come from Madison, Wisconsin, a very, very liberal community, very hostile to pro-lifers, very friendly to the abortion industry. And I think sometimes the Lord is just looking for us to make our best effort. The Lord loves to work with insufficient instruments. We saw that in David, we saw that in Mary giving birth to Jesus. He loves to work where it seems like it's impossible, because then when the Lord triumphs, there's no mistaking who gets the credit and who gets the glory. It's God's. Amen. And so I think the Lord is waiting to do great things here in Tacoma, in Seattle, throughout the great Northwest. I think the Lord is just waiting for us to give Him the answer of yes, that we will answer the call and we will participate in this mission. And even if we don't feel like we've got the talent or the time, we make ourselves available to the Lord's calling. I think He'll do great things here and everywhere.
Amen. Well, Steve, God bless you, sir.
God bless you.
Coming out.
Thanks for having me.
Joining us here in prayer, and we're going to head on over and do some of what we got called down here to do. And let's pray for the unborn, pray for all the victims of Satan's deception here, and hope that you're praying for us and with us at home. God bless you all.